Welcome to This Explainer. We're jumping right into a centuries-old cold case from the deep ocean, the mystery of its most misunderstood giant. We're talking about an animal that lives so far down in the twilight and midnight zones that, honestly, for most of human history, it was practically a ghost. But as we'll uncover today, the actual scientific reality of this creature, it's somehow even more bizarre than the wild myths that surrounded it. For centuries, the only time humans ever saw this creature was when dying bodies washed ashore. You can imagine how that inspired terrifying legends of monster sea serpents capable of dragging entire ships under. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of a medieval seafarer for a second. You're out sailing the open ocean, and suddenly you spot this enormous, silver, ribbon-like body floating on the surface. It's totally understandable that early accounts, heavily inspired by writers like Aristotle and Pliny the Elder, described a literal sea monster with vicious teeth. Over in Japan, its rare appearances were treated as these eerie omens of doom. The oarfish was known as Ryugun Nuzukai, which translates to the messenger from the palace of the Dragon King. The legend basically warned that these deep-sea dwellers would rise to the surface to signal an impending catastrophe. And when dozens of them washed up on Japanese shores right before the devastating 2011 earthquake and tsunami, well, the sheer coincidence of that timing made the myth feel genuinely chilling. But here's the thing. What was actually washing ashore wasn't some mythological demon. It was a breathtaking fish that could grow up to 8 meters. That's over 26 feet long. Now, some historical records claimed they reached 17 meters or even 56 feet, but those huge numbers likely came from sailors stretching bodies across decks or just using forced perspective in old photos. Still, at a confirmed 8 meters, it's officially the longest bony fish on Earth. Modern science has completely shattered those ancient myths. It turns out we're looking at a delicate, toothless filter feeder, not a vicious predator. When 19th century naturalists finally got their hands on actual specimens, those terrifying teeth described in the legends, they completely vanished from the scientific record. So our terrifying sea serpent actually poses absolutely zero threat to humans or ships. Section 1. Anatomy of a giant. Decoding the dead. So for roughly 150 years, almost everything science knew about this animal came solely from studying dead bodies that had drifted up out of the twilight zone. Scientists were basically playing a frustrating waiting game, relying entirely on those rare, random moments when a giant would wash up on a beach. Early naturalists documented a truly bizarre anatomy built for total stillness in the deep ocean. We're talking a scaleless, mirror-like body, and this distinct, flame-red crest rising from its skull like a crown. They have this gelatinous silver coating that reflects any faint light reaching the deep. Plus, they weigh up to 272 kilograms. And get this, unlike us, they might never actually stop growing throughout their entire lives. Basically, an older oarfish simply means a much longer oarfish. Now, that old Japanese earthquake legend resurfaced in a major way after 2011. It actually prompted researchers to finally conduct a massive data study to see if these fish were truly, seismic messengers. Because the oarfish lives so deep underwater, right above one of the most tectonically active regions on the planet, it wasn't completely crazy to think they might be detecting chemical or electromagnetic disturbances right before a quake hit. Well, out of hundreds of deep-sea fish sightings spanning decades, they found exactly one match within 30 days and 100 kilometers of a quake. So that decisively busted the myth. A team of Japanese researchers ran the numbers in 2019, and the correlation just absolutely was not there. The sea serpent was just a fish. And that messenger of doom? It was really just a sick or injured animal that got pushed out of its natural habitat. Section 2. Decoding the senses. The 2014 breakthrough. Up until 2014, having even 1 or 2 fresh bodies to study was incredibly rare. But then, a dozen fresh specimens washed ashore in Japan. Scientists immediately used modern CT scans and were completely shocked to discover one of the most extreme brain-to-body ratios of any vertebrate on Earth. Just picture it, an animal the length of a school bus, navigating the crushing depths and total darkness of the ocean, all operated by a brain barely the size of a walnut. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how it survives with such a tiny brain. For decades, scientists couldn't even find nostrils on the oarfish, but those 2014 X-rays finally revealed them tucked way inside the front of the snout. It was a massive eureka moment. Scientists realized the oarfish literally swims with its mouth slightly open, pumping water across these internal scent receptors. It navigates its featureless, dark world almost entirely by following faint chemical trails.
Section 3, Alive in the Dark, First Contact.
But to truly understand how it lived, science needed to pull off the nearly impossible, observing an oarfish alive, actually moving around in its natural deep-sea habitat. Getting that first live encounter took an incredibly specific chain of accidental and planned events. Back in 2000, researchers anchored a data buoy miles off the coast of France, which accidentally created a miniature artificial ecosystem of algae and tuna. They waited for the annual spring plankton bloom, but because traditional scuba bubbles scare the oarfish away instantly, divers had to use completely silent, closed-circuit rebreathers as an extreme measure just to get close enough without spooking it. When divers finally came face-to-face with one, they were totally awestruck. It doesn't swim horizontally like almost every other fish you've ever seen. It swims entirely vertically. It hovers there, holding its massive body perfectly rigid, head pointing up, steering itself up and down by undulating this incredibly long, ribbon-like dorsal fin. They also learned some wild things about how it blends in. Under UV light on a night dive, researchers discovered previously unknown glowing organs on its forehead and chin. And that mirror-like skin, it reflects ambient light from bioluminescent prey, essentially acting like an invisibility cloak. Oh, and when two oarfish met, they fanned out those red crests and pelvic fins. What we used to think were just decorative fins turned out to be complex communication tools for the pitch-black ocean. Okay, let's dive into one of the most shocking discoveries of all. Almost every adult oarfish ever observed had these blunt, scarred ends to their tails. Scientists naturally assumed, oh, shark attacks, right? Actually, scratch that. Researchers realized the oarfish uses a process called serial autotomy. It literally repeatedly amputates parts of its own body, specifically shedding the lower 2/3. Why? Just to lower its metabolic cost and conserve energy. It's the most extreme weight loss plan imaginable. We even found a 2.2-million-year-old fossil showing this exact same behavior. By studying fin tissues and internal parasites, researchers mapped out its vital place in the deep-sea food chain. The chemical signatures prove they aren't apex predators. They're middlemen, filter feeders eating bioluminescent krill. And the parasites found inside them match the ones found in sperm whales. So they sit right in the middle, a crucial link between the tiny krill at the base and the massive sperm whales at the top. Part 4, the reproduction mystery. So how do they mate? Where do they spawn? For centuries, this was just a giant blank space in our knowledge. But a rare event in 2019 finally allowed scientists to document their reproduction. 2 live oarfish were caught in nets off Okinawa. Scientists successfully performed artificial insemination, which gave us 400 bright red, buoyant eggs. These drift right in the plankton with zero parental care. And unlike surface fish that hatch in a few days, these took an incredibly long 18 days to hatch. But the resulting larvae completely baffled everyone. Taken out of the ocean-specific context, these newborns behaved completely contrary to the adults. Instead of swimming vertically pointing upward, they swam pointing downward. They had this bizarre dorsal filament trailing behind them that was twice their own body length. And no matter what food scientists provided, they refused it, opening their mouths only 6 times total. Tragically, they all died within 4 days. It's a really profound reminder of how fragile our scientific knowledge truly is. We still have absolutely no idea what they actually eat in the wild. Section 5, the final frontier, the unexplored ocean. And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway of this explainer. Let's zoom out from the oarfish for a second to the environment it calls home. We are talking about the deep ocean, the largest habitat on Earth. It contains the largest migration on the planet every single night as biomass moves up and down the water column, way bigger than the Great Migration in Africa. And yet, we have explored less of it than the surface of the moon. It's a vital climate engine, utterly teeming with life we barely comprehend. This beautiful giant is just a singular cold case that happened to drift up into our world. As one researcher perfectly put it, almost every oarfish that has entered the human record came to us by accident. It washes ashore or gets tangled in nets. We have almost never gone into its world and found it on our own terms. It literally just tripped and fell onto our doorstep. So, I'm going to leave you with this final question to think about. If a recognizable 8-meter giant could remain this unknown to us for centuries, what else is waiting in the dark? What other incredible mysteries are swimming around right now, completely unbothered, just waiting to be discovered? Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and as always, stay curious.